All right, welcome to episode 3 of the Turbo LS YJ build. This is the first start episode, and I know you're probably going to skip the video to the first start anyway, so I'll just start with that. So the wiring harness from the last video is connected and loomed. Now we have the stock truck fuse block. This will work on 99 to 02 cars. If you have a newer one, 03 to 07, these will be like big square fuses. So that's how you know. So I have a power cable directly from the battery coming onto this post here. And then this power cable goes directly to my ignition switch. So I'll flip this over here. So we have our engine harness connected with this C2 big connector in the middle. Everything not used is depinned, like in the last video. This C1 connector, pin A9, this is your key on. So this goes to my ignition switch. Pin B11 gets looped over to this post. It's an always on battery feed. And the red connector gets this pin. This is the fuel pump feed. That's everything. Okay, now we're inside the rig, and this is what I come up with for the ignition. So we have this sick Ricer aviation style ignition switch. So this switch is hooked up, the power is hooked up from that battery post on the fuse block. When you turn this switch on, it jumps power over to the crank button. When you turn the switch on, it also goes back into the fuse block on the A9 pin for the power to the fuse block and the computer. So let's hook up the battery and fire this thing up real quick. So over on the battery, by the way, first sponsor on the build, we got the Optima yellow top in the rig. Huge shout out Optima. So on the positive side, we have this marine connector. This cable is going directly to the starter. This cable is going to the stock Jeep fuse box that'll control the headlights and dash. Then we have a long cable going over to the battery post on the fuse block. We also have the grounds hooked up, and that's a really important step if you want your engine to run correctly. We have a ground to the body, a ground to the frame, and the ground directly to the engine. So I'm just gonna hook up the negative and we'll fire this thing up. All right, so we're gonna pop on the on switch. You can hear the fuel pump priming. That's a nice function of hooking it up to the stock fuse block and computer, and then we're gonna crank it over. Sick. Full disclosure, that was not the first time I fired it up, so I knew that was gonna happen, and the excitement has worn off a little bit, but still super exciting, huge step in the build. The lights are connected. You can kind of see that there. They're not grounded, so it's just showing both. But the dash should have power when I put the key in and turn it to the on switch. The next thing I have to address before we can get drive shafts is the transmission mount. It's currently just propped up by a jack stand. I'm either gonna have to modify the stock belly pan to somehow mount the AX15, or I'll just have to build a custom cross member for the transmission. We're also at a point where I can finally start putting things back together. So I can throw the fenders on, figure out where I'm gonna mount the computer. A couple things I have to button up on the engine. We have these EGR block-off plates. This cheap one is not a secure fit. So I might just cake it with RTV and secure it in there. But the one on the top is working nicely. Then I have this hose from the idle air control valve, the steam port, steam line. Just gonna use the stock setup, but I'll drill and tap a barbed fitting onto the water pump here and just route that directly into the water pump. Also need to torque the harmonic balancer to spec. And last but not least, custom lines for the power steering. So figure out some high pressure custom lines. So we got the high pressure, low pressure. So we just need one high pressure line, and we can just use a regular hose and clamps to the low pressure. I need to install the new clutch master and slave cylinder, bolt that to the new transmission adapter and hook it up to the pedal. I gotta install the AX15 shifter and figure out a way to mount the transfer case shifter here as well.
Here are my very fancy looking but very cheap block hugger headers. They do not fit with the motor mount setup, so I'm gonna have to chop the flanges off, at least the passenger side, and come up with my own kind of exhaust solution there. Also seen here is my fresh, cheap eBay radiator. Should do the trick just fine. So this is the project I'm dreading the most. This is the Ford 8.8 axle swap. So I have to shave the axle down, cut off all the spring perches and shock mounts, track bar mounts, completely weld on new spring perches and shock tabs, and do full custom brake lines, new brake pads, new calipers, everything, and swap that into the Jeep so I can measure it up for some custom drive shafts.
About the engine working, I'll be able to record a little more. God, it's bright. Can't see. So yeah, slowly but surely, we're checking things off the list. She should be driving in no time. I'm planning on recording a lot more stuff for long form YouTube. So yeah, thanks for watching, really appreciate it. Let me know if you have any insight, comments, concerns, advice. Cool. Cheers. Peace.